when we were thinking about the poets who could be a part of this series, your name came up, and the moment that I was looking at your work, I just thought, wow, this would be a fabulous addition. So really pleased to have you here. This is Mariko Nagai, and this is Poetry on the Move.
Hi everyone, virtually. My name is Mariko Nagai. I'm based in Tokyo right now. Okay, so the first piece I'll be reading is from a book called Under the Broken Sky. And this is actually not an adult book. This is a verse novel for children, 8 to 12, historical verse novel. So as you can see, everything is written in a verse format. And it creates an interesting relationship between the demands that poetry has on a form, and as well as a narrative time movement that a novel demands, and also character development a novel demands. Right. So it's an interesting format that I find works for me, and I think it also works for what's known as reluctant readers in America, kids who aren't necessarily a big reader. They might get overwhelmed with all these words in a white page. So at least there's a lot more white space here. It's a prose novel. So this is called Tigers Travel 1,000 Li and Back. With a red thread and a needle, I sew a stitch, then tie a knot on the back. I'm not sure who Tochan, my father, will be fighting. I sew another stitch. Not the Soviets. They've signed a treaty with His Majesty, the Emperor, promising not to fight. Each stitch follows the outline of a tiger I drew on a cotton fabric. Not the Manchurians. Why would Tochin fight them when living with their friends ever since Manchuria was created 14 years ago? 5 races is one. The Nimbadi, needles of 1,000 people, a good luck charm every soldier is supposed to keep. Not the Americans. They aren't here yet. Tigers can travel 1,000 li and back. They always come back. Like Tochan, who will travel 1,000 li and come back. So who is Tochan supposed to fight? I wanted to share what this sort of singing buddy is. And it's an interesting, there's a lot of them floating around on eBay, surprisingly, or in Yahoo auction. And what they are is basically this sort of cloth, like a belt, that's supposed to be worn underneath their uniforms. So soldiers are supposed to wear them under their uniforms. And it's always made with 1,000 stitches. And what happens is it's supposed to keep soldiers alive. So in Imperial Japan, especially when soldiers were drafted, they were told, I will die for the country, I will die for the emperor. But then these women are sewing these stitches saying, come back. Right. So there's a tension between this public discourse, die for the emperor, and then the private discourse, which is come back alive. I have about 8 or 9 of them. And the fact that they came back means that soldiers came back. So what I feel like whenever I'm reading those as actions, I feel like, okay, at least these soldiers made it back. And I don't feel too bad.
So what kind of archival work did you do to produce this whole novel?
Right. I find the definition of archive extremely loose. So oral history is one of those archives as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So there was a book that I was writing that became this monster about my grandfather who died in World War II. So all the research archival research that I did for his work kind of went into Under the Broken Sky, also went into the other book, Irradiate Cities.
Right.
And now I feel like that my grandfather book became sort of this quilt pieces where I actually undid the seams and pasted in another. So all these from that book, I cut it apart and it appears in different fragments in different books.
Oh, that's fascinating. It's not, so because we focus, I think, very, very much on the product, right? On the
Right.
thing you can hold in your hands.
And we
We
love
don't
it. We
always,
love it.
oh no, we do, but it's not always linear, right? It's not as linear. And so really what you're saying is, in my head, I'm imagining this as spatial, right? You've, for lack of a better phrase, sort of farmed out different parts into other creations. So, would you read something else?
So I will be reading from this book called The Radiate Cities. And this came out in 2017, I think. Yes. And this is all about archive. So I was sort of explaining this. It's a photo textbook, and you see that these are squares, and I think squares are extremely unintuitive. I think when our visions see things in a rectangular way, instead of in this sort of panorama sort of way, right? Mm-hmm. We don't naturally see things in a square. So I think in this book, this idea of artificiality, what is truth, what is lies, and I think oftentimes when there's catastrophes or traumas, and especially in wars or whether things that you can't control, things that we think we know, and a thing that we're told that we should know, and what we're experiencing is all in contradiction.
That's right.
So
it's a disconnect.
When I was in Fukushima and doing field work, I met this woman in evacuation site, and so she said, "Oh, there were so many birds in the sky this summer," and I was like, "Oh, so why do you think that is?" And she said, "It's because of dead bodies." And I thought, "Oh dear." And what's interesting is about 2 kilometers away in a different evacuation site, I met another woman, and she said, "Oh, this summer was very eerily. There was no birds in the sky." And I was like, "Oh, why do you say that?" And she said, "Because of radiation." Oh. So it makes you wonder, 2 kilometers, it's not that far away, but they're telling their versions of truth. And they try to rationalize it, whether it's scientifically, radiation or dead bodies.
Right.
So, are they telling the truth? Who's telling the truth here?
Right.
And I think we don't know what's happening, so we want to know for certain. And I even found myself going through that where, during 2020, I refused to read anything new. And I didn't watch anything that I haven't watched before. Everything was either I've read the books before or it was a rerun. And I think I just wanted to know that certainty, how the story ends.
Right. Which what you're saying really is that you were drawing on the archive, even if it's contemporary, it's something already made. Oh, that's so interesting. It brings certainty.
And I think the nature of archives, and I'm sort of technically talking about the museum archives, they do have agendas, don't they? So in Japan, there's Yasukuni Shrine Museum, which is very conservative. They are revisionist. They sort of paint themselves as being attacked. So the narrative of Yasukuni Shrine is ABCD, Americans, British, Chinese, and Dutch, basically cut off the supplies from Japan. Japan had to fight back. We were it wasn't the war that they wanted to fight. That's the narrative that Yasukuni Shrine has. If you go to Hiroshima Peace Museum, it has a completely different narrative. But then it was interesting is they'll have a phrase like, "A bomb was dropped." So the subject is missing. I mean, the subject
the passive voice
is missing. It's as if the bombs came out of nowhere. So there's no, there's really no sense of blaming someone, but there's sort of
but it didn't just fall from the sky.
Yeah, somebody had to do it.
Right? Someone dropped it.
um, and so it's I think all of this sort of ties into this idea of the archives as it's fascinating, but it's also agenda driven depending on where you go. And
Yep.
and like I said,
Okay.
I have my own agenda as well.
Yeah.
So when I think about archives, I'm thinking, I'm just kind of picking and choosing what I'm looking at and how I'm projecting my own thoughts onto an object or a thought. Um, so why don't I read a little bit from this book, Irradiate Cities? This piece is called A Woman, a Child, and the Camera. And this is from a National Archive film um, on Nagasaki by the Atomic Bomb Casualty Committee. That was a hospital, sorry, it's not a hospital, it's a lab. It was created both in Hiroshima and Nagasaki to study the atomic bomb casualty, basically. They weren't there to treat, but they were there to dissect. They actually still have specimens like these. This is actually not from the ABCC, it's actually from the university. And the archivist there basically said, look, you can't photograph this, but here it is. And he opened his fact, and it was filled with deformed fetus and babies. And when they let me into the archive, the specimen archive, they specifically told me, do not photograph any personal information like names, nothing that's related with identifiable things like hands, faces. So anyways, so this is a woman, a child, and the camera. It's basically, it's a film footage. And the ABCC, what they did, they documented and they studied. So these were seen as specimen more than anything else. Like this, a woman stands at 3/4 view, just like she should have been on that day, and the invisible camera reenacts the position of the bomb. A woman stands facing the invisible camera with her son strapped to her back. Quote, the mother's face and entire body were burned, whereas only the child's leg, which was protruding, were burned. End of quote. The camera eye closes in on her face. The camera eye closes in on her child's leg. She looks unblinking at the lens, her face blank, and the camera eye stares back without emotion. Quote, mother undresses with her child in the back. Straps are removed from over her breasts to show unburned areas where the straps were at the time of the blast. End of quote. The camera looks and the woman stares back. She has not blinked, not once. Her naked torso is red because the film is in Technicolor and colors are unforgiving. The child's legs are shown, first his left leg, then his right leg, one foot fossilized in the shape of the hardened skin, like this, like a dead bird's clawed leg. Quote, the child's face, which shows no presence of burns, contrasts with the bad burn scars on the mother's face. End of quote. The woman keeps staring into the camera, half her face burnt. She does not blink. She does not smile, her eyes fixed in front of her. She stares back at the camera, and her nipples become two eyes and stares back, unblinking at the camera. The camera stares back like this. And it's a little bit hard to see, probably, but oops.
Yeah. Is it a prose poem then?
It's a prose poem with columns. So instead of a line break, I use columns as a way to indicate that that every line has the same weight as the other line. That there is no one image that has more meaning than the other. So there's equality in weight in all these images that I'm working with, and also that time is actually happening simultaneously.
Both the excerpt and the poem you just read. And in even this discussion is that it is a completely different way of approaching the idea of archives than we've had with any other poet, which I love. I mean, I think it shows the expansiveness of that kind of work. And what I love too is
every time I travel anywhere, I usually contact museums beforehand and say, I'd like to see this and this and this in your collection. As a way of sort of entering into that city as well. Yeah. And they're quite open about it. They love having people come in. So I encourage anyone to actually go into archives and it's just write to them saying, I'd like to see your collection, blah, blah, blah.
Wow. I see, and I never thought to do that, although, once I'm there, I love to visit those places, but I don't, you've just got me thinking about so many different ways to think about this personal archives, the fact that you now have this collection of photographs off of eBay.
And then you have your personal family archive as well.
Right.
I'm cleaning, my mother passed away in December, so I'm cleaning out her house. And I mean, bless her heart, aspiring middle class woman, but she has about 50 kimonos. And they take up 3 wardrobes, and she labeled each and every one of them. And sometimes she stuck her own photos in it, like the day she wore that kimono.
She made an archive.
She made an archive. Well, she'll say a kimono for my mother that was worn by my grandmother, and so it's like so I think their archives are everywhere.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is there's always that danger of being a hoarder.
It's a fine line.